Good evening and welcome to another episode of Late Night with Lenette. I'm Lenette Peterson, your host. I'm excited for this evening's show. We have the one and only Merrimack GOP Chairman, Chris Buda. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Lenette.
Welcome. So now, what got you interested in the Merrimack GOP?
Well, it was back in 2010.
Yep.
The Republican Party had lost just about everything 2 years prior. And I was reading on various blogs and stuff that a good thing to get involved with was your local Republican Party. So I started going to the meetings, and lo and behold, within about a year's time frame, I became the chairman.
I was going to say, I know it wasn't much time.
Yeah.
So you were about a year and a half. Now you basically started out working on one campaign.
Yes, I was working on Frank Ginta's 2012
Right.
election campaign to beat Carol Shea Porter.
Right. Now, what's been the biggest challenge as being chairman? Is there a challenge?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges with the job. I think I had to learn a lot about fundraising and how to properly report that. Okay, that's a requirement, especially for a committee like what we have in Merrimack, where we actually can raise some money. A lot of other town committees really can't raise a lot of money. We actually can here because we're a good-sized community, and an R+6 town, by the way, PVI rating. So we got a lot of Republicans here. Second, I think is dealing with some of the infighting that goes on amongst some of our members and some of our elected officials.
Yeah.
That I think is challenging, to say the least.
Yeah, Republicans like to eat their own. That's for sure.
That's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah. Now, what is the highlight of the position? I mean, a glorious position like chairman of the Merrimack GOP, that's going to be a highlight.
Yeah, you get recognized by a lot of people. This is a town where the state party, generally looks to a lot for good election results, and so that's one of the highlights for the job. And you're the focal point that they go to when you're the local chair.
Yeah.
So it also kind of helps you out with other people, especially even people here in local government. You're the local party chair. Well, okay, then now you get, we know who you are, and you're somebody of some importance.
Right.
That's the way at least they look at you anyway.
Yeah.
At least
and
I
you've
think
been in
they
there.
do. But
Yeah, exactly. You've been in there for a few terms, so.
Yeah, this is my third and my last term doing the job as chairman. I'm ready to do other things after this. I'm not sure exactly what, but this will be my last term doing the job as a town chair here in Merrimack.
Well, you've done a phenomenal job, that's for sure. Phenomenal.
Thank you.
The funds that have been raised under your regime it's been unbelievable.
Yeah, we've done very well
very
financially.
well. Yes.
And it's good. We get some good speakers, and we get good events that people want to go to.
Yep.
And we don't charge too much, and that always makes everything work. And as long as you're not overdoing it on the prices and on the cost, then I think you can actually have a successcknow fundraising event.
And that you have. You've had some. You've had some good fundraising events,
and they've been a lot of fun too. That's
yes.
I know years ago when I started going to the committee meetings, I never really thought the fundraisers were actually going to be fun. I thought, they're just asking me for money, and I'll show up for a little cheesy dinner or whatever. But it actually is fun. It's a lot of fun. We see a lot of people I know, and we have a good time. So that makes it all the better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you were at the state GOP Convention last go round, correct?
Yes, last go round and the go round before that. I was elected delegate here in Merrimack in 2012 and in 2014. I came up short in 2010. And in the 2014 year, I was actually appointed by Jennifer Horn to be on the Credentials Committee. And what the Credentials Committee does is they look at the qualifications of all the delegates to the convention to make sure that the proper individuals get the proper credentials when they come through the door. And people who are not authorized to be on the floor as delegates will not get those credentials. So you have to basically get a guest pass to get in otherwise. But you will not be seated with the other delegates on the floor.
Right.
And that's generally how it works. And it works the same way in all the different conventions. It works. That's the way it works in the state convention. That's the way it's going to work in the convention in Cleveland in July. So.
Now, what takes place at the state GOP convention?
In the presidential election year, the electors that would come from New Hampshire, should the Republicans win New Hampshire, will be picked at that convention. Also, the party platform, every 2 years gets voted on at the convention, as well as the organization going forward for the state committee. Is how many state committee members each county and each of the 4 large cities gets. For the state party going into the next 2 years are all that's voted on at the convention by convention delegates.
Now, how does the state convention compare to the national convention? Are there any comparisons in the two?
The only two similarities, in major similarities, is that the platforms both get voted on. The national platform gets voted on at the national convention, and the state platform gets voted on at the state convention. The biggest difference is that in the national convention, it's really where the presidential candidate gets, the presidential nominee actually gets picked.
Right.
Okay. The voters vote in every primary and caucus, and they award delegates to each candidate based on each state party rules in every state. So, for example, here in New Hampshire, we have a proportional representation. So the winners of delegates here in New Hampshire will get a certain percentage of delegates based on the proportion of their vote. For example, Donald Trump won New Hampshire this year. I believe he won with 35% of the vote, and we have like 26 delegates. So he gets 11 out of those 26.
Gotcha.
So also, in addition, as part of the delegation, there are 3 automatic delegates that come from New Hampshire outside of the people that get picked per the presidential candidate. Those are the state chairman, the national committeeman, and the national committeewoman. They all 3 of them are automatic delegates to the RNC convention in Cleveland.
Oh, very good, very good. Now, are there some states that are winner take all?
Yes, they are. The 2 biggest ones are Ohio and Florida, and that comes after March 15th. The rules set out by the Republican National Committee 4 years ago basically stated that March 15th was going to be the date where the earliest winner-take-all states can have a primary or a caucus. Okay, anything before that had to be in proportional representation only. After March 15th, it became optional. You could either have a winner-take-all or you could have winner-take-most, like a lot of states, like Wisconsin coming up is a winner-take-most state. How that works is you have a certain number of state delegates, and then you have a certain number of delegates that are awarded per congressional district. So the winner of the state delegates, whether the winner of the state gets all the state delegates, and the winner of each congressional district gets the congressional delegates awarded by congressional district. It's winner take all per congressional district. So, but you can have a candidate win the state, and they can win most of the congressional districts, but another candidate may win 2 of the congressional districts, and they get all the delegates from those districts, and then the person who wins everything else gets the remaining, all the delegates from every other district they won, as well as the state.
Very good. Now, this upcoming convention this summer is going to be in Cleveland.
Yep.
And so far, it looks like it's going to be a heated battle. Or is the rumors true that it's going to be a split convention, a broken convention? What do you know about this upcoming convention?
All right. Here's what's going to happen. You have you're going to get about right now the way it works is there's 2,472 total delegates to the RNC convention in Cleveland.
Repeat that number.
2,472, 2472.
Yep.
Okay. To get the nomination, you have to have 50% plus 1. So 50% of 2472 is 1236. So if you add 1 more to that, you get 1237.
Right.
Now you've heard that number, it's being floated around the press. Donald Trump has to get the 1237. That's where that number comes from. It's 50% plus 1. And it's on the first ballot, okay? So the first ballot is basically the delegates awarded by the voters, either via primaries or caucuses, up until convention day. The last primary or caucus is going to be June 7th. So we got to go all the way to June 7th, and then after June 7th, if a candidate has the 12 the 1237, if they have that, then they will have enough votes to win on the first ballot at the convention. It becomes a formality. And that's like it is most years. Like when Mitt Romney won back in 2012, he had more than the number of delegates he needed. So basically the first ballot was nothing more than a formality to nominate him. And then the rest of the convention becomes about speeches and this and that and all the stuff that's made for television. This year, though, on the other hand, this may not come out to be like that. It's very likely we're going to have what you call a contested convention, not a brokered convention. There's a difference between the two.
Okay.
A brokered convention is like the convention of the old days, when a few party bosses would go into a back room and cut some deals, and then that would be a certain candidate would be floated out to the stage, and that's who everybody was voting for.
Gotcha.
Okay. A contested convention is that you got multiple candidates going into the convention. Nobody has secured the nomination, and you're going to start with the first ballot. The first ballot is what, the primaries, the caucuses, like I had just explained earlier. If nobody wins on the first ballot, now you go to the second ballot. And this is where things start to change. Most delegates to the National Convention are sworn. They have a duty to vote for the candidate that they're pledged to on the first ballot. For example, we have 11 out of the 26 delegates coming out of New Hampshire are pledged to vote for Donald Trump. Okay, they can vote. They will vote for him on the first ballot. There are 4 delegates that are pledged to vote for John Kasich. They will vote for John Kasich on the first ballot. There are 3 that are pledged to vote for Jeb Bush and Ted Cruz, and those individuals will vote for those candidates. And there's 2 for Marco Rubio. So that's how the first ballot will shake out. Once the first ballot is over, depending on the state party rules, the delegates now become unbound. So now they can pick a candidate, another candidate other than the one that they're pledged to support. They have the option of doing that. And some of them will do that. Okay. Here in this state, though, each candidate picks their own delegates to go to the convention.
Right.
Other states, many other states, delegates to the National Convention are elected at a state convention. And then when they get to the National Convention, they're supposed to vote the way the primary voters did in their state. But when they get to but they may not be supporters of that candidate, but they're pledged to do it anyway. And then when they get to the second ballot, that's when they can change. And that's what all this battling is about right now.
Right. Now I got a question for you. Now, even if a candidate has already dropped out of the race, they still get their delegates at the convention. Is that true?
Right, unless they release their delegates. Now, Marco Rubio has dropped out of the race, but he has opted not to release his delegates. So he might be looking for something at the convention, some kind of deal to be made, perhaps on the second ballot, to say, okay, maybe you might make me vice president, or maybe I might be secretary of state, or whatever, and that's part of a deal.
Gotcha.
And I get that deal, and then I will in turn release my delegates and encourage them to support you on, say, second ballot.
Gotcha. Now, has anyone released their delegates at this point?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know if that's true, but I do not believe that's the case right now.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. That even though they're out of the race, they still get their delegates.
Yeah, and it's like playing cards.
Right.
They're playing their cards.
Yeah.
And so that it's interesting that, unfortunately, in the past, every time we've had one of these conventions, we've never won the general election. That's the downer about but I will say this, in 2008, the Hillary Clinton-Barack Obama matter was not settled after the last primary was over. Barack Obama had 100 delegates more than Hillary did, but he did not have enough to clinch the nomination. So what Nancy Pelosi did, because the Democrats have what's called a superdelegate rule, where they have all their elected officials, their congressmen, their senators, their governors, they're automatically delegates to the convention. The Republicans don't have superdelegates like that. So what Nancy Pelosi did, given the fact that the Democrats had a majority in Congress at the time, she turned around and twisted the arms of most of her Democrat membership and said, "You will support Barack Obama." Okay, and so that's what she needed to do, and she basically turned around and helped give him. That was just enough delegates, right? Just enough super delegates right there to put him over the top.
Gotcha.
And so, so there was no contested convention at the Democrat convention in 2008 because of that. Now there may be a deal. There's going to be a whole month and a week, a whole month and a half almost, of time period that will lapse between June 7th, the last primary day, and the convention on July 18th. There may be deals that will be cut in between then to avoid this contested convention. But the way things are shaping up now, I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, I doubt it. It's a mess right now.
It really is a mess, and it's there are candidates that have actually made this a mess.
Yeah.
And when you turn around and you insult people and you insult other candidates, all throughout the race in order to try to get a better poll position, eventually that bill comes due at the end of the day. And those people that had to withdraw from the race that have delegates are not going to be inclined to come out and support your candidacy, even though you might think that you're the front runner and you might think that you deserve their support.
Right. So there's a lot of weight to these candidates that have already dropped out that have delegates.
Yeah, there is, and they can play their cards, and they will play their cards.
Right.
They've shown no inclination to bow out and cede everything to the current front runner.
Right. Now, can you think of a convention that has been more a mess than this one?
We haven't even started this convention.
I know it.
Matter of fact, the key committees that are going to be playing a huge role in this convention haven't even been the delegates haven't even been named yet. But
there's already so much talk about the convention, and it's not even close. I can't remember any year before now where the conversation about the convention has been so high on everybody's list.
I think 1976 was the last time I remember my living memory, and I was a 10-year-old kid back then. When they Republicans actually had a contested convention. Democrats had one in 1980, I will say this for the RNC. The RNC has put on their webpage basically another website to link to that will explain the entire process of the convention. But I want to go over the three most important committees that will probably be playing a role in this. Of course, the Convention Rules Committee is the first one. It's made up of 2 delegates from each state, as well as probably some, I believe there's going to be a chairman that will be named by Reince Priebus for that convention. Then there's going to be the Credentials Committee, similar to the Credentials Committee that I was on at the state party. Now, the Rules Committee for the convention, will make the rules for the convention. All right. The Credentials Committee is going to basically certify that the delegates that are coming into the convention will get the proper credentials and that they're seated. Okay. And then the last one is the Committee on Contests. And this was a committee that played a huge role in 2012. You might have heard about Ron Paul's maneuvering up in Maine to try to get control over the national delegates to the national convention. What went wrong there was the Ron Paul folks had basically swarmed. There were a lot of empty delegate slots at the state convention, so they basically encouraged their supporters to show up there and see if you can get one of those empty delegate slots. And the Credentials Committee was overwhelmed with all the people coming in and having to vet everybody to determine whether they're eligible to be a delegate or not. And meanwhile, the convention on the floor is actually starting, and business is being done. And they picked a convention chairman who turned around and swung the gavel and ran through just about everything. There were several points of order that were brought during the convention saying, look, you don't have a quorum. The Credentials Committee didn't come out here and say, we have this many delegates or anything like that. And those were ruled as out of order by the convention chairman. And that's not something you don't do. You really can't have a party meeting or a convention without a quorum. You can't do any business without at least a minimum number of qualified people to be there in order to have the business conducted. If you don't have a credentials report from the credentials committee, you don't know what your quorum is. You could have 10 people, you could have 10,000 people. You just don't know. Okay, everybody in the room may not be a qualified delegate, so you have to know what that number is. So anyway, what happened was all these national delegates were elected this way. I don't know when they got their quorum finally, but it was long after the convention started. And there were several people up in Maine that challenged this, and they challenged this to the RNC Contests Committee. And this is another key committee that's going to be picked, and I believe it was made up of RNC members. The one, at least the one in 2012 was. I don't know what the one this year is going to be made up of. And they reviewed the process that Maine went through to pick their national delegates, and they ruled that there were several flaws in the state convention. One of them was the fact they didn't have a quorum. They didn't have a credentials committee report, and so technically they couldn't do any business until they knew how many people they had, and the chairman ruled that out of order. So they basically threw out a lot of the Maine's delegates that were picked at that convention, and they picked their own delegates. They picked other people from Maine to go there, and the Ron Paul people were crying foul because they got shut out. They got shut out of the national convention at the end of the day. So the Committee on Contest is going to be a key committee as well. As a matter of fact, there's already rumblings now in South Carolina about the 50 delegates that went to Donald Trump. First of all, the state party hasn't actually picked the individuals that are going to be the delegates, okay? Even though they're all supposed to be pledged to support Trump on the first ballot. But part of the reason, part of the gig is to get those 50, you have to pledge that you're going to support the Republican nominee no matter who that is. Well, he's broken that pledge several times.
Right.
So, verbally at least, maybe not in writing, but verbally he's broke. So there's probably going to be a challenge to those delegates in the contest committee. That's one thing. So there's going to be more of these that are going to pop up during the year. So this whole thing starts this month when Reince Priebus starts picking these people that are going to be on these committees, including the chairman. So stay tuned. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
And with the last primary not being until June 7th,
yeah,
there's a lot of time. There's still a lot of monkeying around with delegates and.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, Ted Cruz. There's several states that have unbound delegates. They're not having any conventions or any primaries or caucuses. Colorado, North Dakota, and I believe it might be I'm not sure if it's Montana or not, or Wyoming, one of them. And the North Dakota folks just pick their delegates, and these are going to be unbound delegates. But on the Red State blog, rumor has it that 18 out of the 23 that are coming from North Dakota are Ted Cruz supporters.
So they're not going to have a primary or anything. They know they have that many delegates.
Yeah.
And the delegates can pick and choose
Yeah.
who they want to support.
Right. And now here in New Hampshire, if we didn't have our First in the Nation primary, the state party always has the option of saying, okay, we're going to pick our delegates at the annual meeting. And the state party will turn around and vote on the delegates who are going to go to Washington. And if they want to do that, they can do that.
Right. Oh, wow.
But we have the First in the Nation primary, so that's never going to happen.
Right, exactly, yeah. And having the First in the Nation primary is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure is. And but in a way, this when the election starts heating up after it leaves here, some people like me always pay attention to it, but some people kind of like, well, I cast my vote, so I'm all done.
Right. Yeah. And some of us, when we get involved in the primary, a year or more before the primary even takes place.
Yeah, I know.
This is the place to be if you're a political junkie.
Sure is. That's for sure.
And then even, with the First in the Nation, then you still follow all the other primaries, and then you want to see who's going to be the delegates. Like if Rick Santorum had received any delegates here in New Hampshire, well, I was down as one of his. Possibly it could have been one of his delegates. Yeah. And
by the way, if anybody's interested, the actual delegates who will be going to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, their names are actually posted up on the Secretary of State's webpage. So if you're interested and you want to go look at that, just go to SOS from New Hampshire, and It'll be posted up there, I believe, on the first page, or at least where it says 2016 election. So
right. And and they only have to vote that way for the first ballot.
First ballot.
Second ballot, you can be rogue, and
right.
go.
And after that, you can be rogue too.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that all fares on the first ballot. But I don't. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, that my vote doesn't count if the delegates pick the nominee. And that's not true. Your vote does count because
for sure.
because your vote counted to the first ballot, and in 9 times out of 10, generally that's it right there. Okay.
Right.
What happens is if the majority of Americans can't pick a candidate, then the delegates have to do it. Somebody has to pick a nominee. So when the delegates when we go to the second ballot, now it's basically Plan B.
Right.
Right. So that's what has to happen.
Now, do you think it'll go beyond the second ballot? Think it'll go to a third or a fourth ballot?
I don't know. I don't think so, but
yeah.
Who knows? There's been a lot of curveballs this year, so I'm not gonna bring out the crystal ball and say it won't.
Yeah, there's definitely been a few curveballs to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting convention, to say the least. Well, even just getting up to the convention, think there's a chance Trump could get the 1,237 delegates?
It's getting tougher for him every day, and he's not making it easy for himself either.
Right. Yeah.
And for the folks that voted for Donald Trump, they shouldn't feel disheartened that their vote isn't going to count. Their vote did count.
Right.
And it counted in a big way. What Donald Trump does after he leaves New Hampshire, that's out of everybody's control. It's only up to him. So.
Oh, yeah. So there's still a lot going on with the primaries.
Yeah.
Don't lose interest yet. Don't lose interest until, even after the convention. Then you got to start all over again. You got to get that. You got to get that nominee. You have to get that nominee elected.
Exactly. So, needless to say, I think one thing to pay attention to too is that the one thing that's weighing in on against Donald Trump right now is the fact that he's double digits behind Hillary in the general election, and I think a lot of people aren't really warming up to that too much.
No. Well, we are at the end of our show. Well, I think we could have done 2 segments on this one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Always a good time talking with
Thanks,
you.
Lenette.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Late Night with Lenette. Good night and God bless.